Hi, today we're going to take a quick look at some of the settings that are available in ScanLister and do a walkthrough of the menu settings here. We're going to start by opening up the settings menu, and we're going to walk through each item that we have here. The first thing that you see is the fulfilled options, which has two sub-tabs, and some of the settings related to FBA and some for merchant fulfilling. So we'll walk through these items here. Scan and label mode, this first item that you'll see, this refers to how you want to print your stickers. Some people like to print the stickers, the product stickers, at the end, and some people like to print as you go. My preferred method is to use scan and label mode, so I'm able to label each item as I scan it in. So the idea here is that once you have this enabled, you're going to scan an item, and when you list that item, the sticker is going to print automatically. You put it on the product and you set it to the side as you're building your shipments. And if you want to do your labels at the end, you can do that easily as well. You're just going to go ahead and disable this, and as with any settings that you change when you're working in this menu, you always want to hit the Save Settings button at the bottom. Otherwise, it will not save your settings. So the next sub-tab we're going to look at is Merchant Fulfilled. This has to do with your shipping settings. So if you have custom shipping settings that you have configured within your dashboard in Seller Central, you can invoke them here so that ScanLister can use them. If you have a handling time that you would like to add, if there's a particular shipping template that you want to use, you don't have to make any changes here for everything to work, but if you do have custom changes on Seller Central, you can sort of link up ScanLister to work with those. So the next tab we're going to look at is the listing modes. Now this has to do with some of the settings for the two primary listing modes that you can use in ScanLister. Bulk mode is really designed for efficiency, for listing items fast, for using sort of cookie cutter descriptions and things like that. Just really designed for efficiency and speed. This is great if you're listing books or media, things like that. And some of the options related to that here. We'll walk through detailed mode settings in a moment, but when we look at this first sub-tab, bulk mode, this show extended data. If you enable this, what it does, and I'm actually going to show you how it works on the main screen, but if we enable this, it's going to give us a special window up here. Let me close this and show you. I'm going to put an item in. You can see that this this has appeared here in the menu. It wasn't there before. So if we, let's see, put an item in here. Let's search for an item. And I'm going to go ahead and list this product here. You'll notice that it gives us this extra information. If you're scanning a lot of items in quick and you like to make a very fast reference of some of this info, this can really be helpful. And it's designed to really catch your eye so you can not have to strain as you're trying to get this information. Now, of course, you have a bunch of settings. You can change what appears in these windows and really customize it. You don't have to use all the windows if you don't want to. So it's kind of a neat option to have there for displaying info. On the fly you can reference. Now, when it comes to pricing, some people like to use a default price. Let's just say $100 for every item, and you can let your repricer catch that and make those changes as the items are on their way to Amazon. Other times it might make more sense to, say for example, match the low used buy box price. Okay, so if you want to do that, it will automatically match that price. So there's some custom settings there for how your pricing is done at the time of listing. If you want to automatically reject ranks that are above a certain level, you can go ahead and enable that here. Let's just say if you don't want to list anything over a rank of 2 million, you would set that here and just hit save. And we'll go ahead and disable this for now. Save settings. If you don't like to list items with no rank, or of course, if there are certain products that you want to block and make sure you never send them in, you can put those ASINs here and it will give you a blacklist. ScanLister will not allow you to list that item. So if we go over to the next sub-tab here of detailed mode, this is where you're going to get the opportunity to click through several screens that are going to really allow you to examine that item and customize the listing for that item as you go through. This can be really helpful. So again, you have your settings for the shipping calculator. It's going to allow you to really look at the fees as you click through detailed mode. And so these are some of the settings here that you can use. There's a profit calculator and a fee calculator. You can set that to whatever makes sense for your workflow and how you're listing. And obviously you have your pricing settings that you can do. So hopefully this is pretty straightforward. It's basically a lot of the same settings in detailed mode. And we can look at those workflows in a separate video, but for now, here's the settings. Hopefully all this makes sense to everybody. Let's see. The next screen we're going to look at is the list screen. So this has to do with different items that you have stored within ScanLister that pull into your listings. For example, you want to record the supplier as you go, so you can have your list of suppliers here. You can add them in pretty easily. Goodwill, for example, and you can put a supplier code. Some people, the reason we have a code is that if you like to have the supplier encoded into your SKU, you may not want to have the entire word Goodwill in there. There's a limit on how long a SKU can be. So if you had Goodwill of Greater New York, obviously you're not going to put that in your SKU, but you could make a code, Goodwill Greater New York, and that would end up in your SKU. So that's what that's for. Pretty self-explanatory. If we and you can, of course, export these, as you'll see here. So now if we go and we look at the next sub-tab, conditions, these are going to be all your condition settings. You can uncheck conditions that you don't use to make your menu a little bit shorter. Your drop-down menu that comes up here, and just make it easier to navigate through. So the next menu here, these are where you can customize your condition notes. You'll notice that you can have more than one note for each condition. So I can have two different kinds of notes for items that are in good condition, for example. And let me show you how that works. So if you look here, if I set this to good condition, you'll see that I have two notes available. So it's a lot of options for customizing there. Let's go back over to lists and condition notes. Now you'll also see this setting here, enable editing in condition note dropdown. And what this does, let me enable this and I'm going to show you. Save settings. Close. Sometimes I may just occasionally want to add a quick note into an existing note. Make a small change. So for example, let's just say I want to write in here something like may have where to cover, something like that. Not sure why you'd want to put that specifically in there, but you can edit this on the fly, okay? And when you do that, it doesn't permanently change it. See, I think yes, but it's just a temporary change. So as you can see, it goes away when I click off that condition and click back. But it may be helpful for some people. Now, of course, you might accidentally type in there, so some people like to keep that disabled. but that's just an option for you if that's something you find helpful. Okay, so we're going to turn that off for right now. The next thing we're going to look at is our Skew Pattern, and there are lots of options here to customize what appears in your SKU. And this is hopefully fairly self-explanatory. It does give you the order of things, so you can see, we can click plus to add an item here, and if we wanted to add any one of these items to our SKU, to capture for being able to reference those items quick, you can see this is how I have the SKU pattern set right now. Now, we talked about putting your supplier code, see that in there? That's something you can have in there, so that would actually be at the end. The sequence is super important to have in there so that you're not duplicating any SKUs. You can drag these and rearrange them in a way that makes sense. I do like to put the sequence closer to the end. You definitely don't want to have it in the middle. And the reason I like to put the date in the middle, or at least a prefix and then the date, is because of the way Seller Central search works. You'll find that the way their search works in the inventory management in inventory management in Amazon, it's better to have the date in the beginning. So if you search at Amazon, you'll see what I mean. So let's look at the next tab here, and that's going to be product information. So you do want to have that enabled. And now this is where, when you scan an item in, it's going to display the vital information about that item right here on your screen. Now, a lot of times there are multiple listings for the same item on Amazon. So in that case, you can let ScanLister know how you would like to deal with that. Now, if you choose, say for example, you set this to choice, each time there's multiple items found for the same, say an ISBN. If you put an ISBN in and it finds two different results for that item, it will give you the choice. It will present you a screen which lets you choose which one of those listings you want to list under. I tend to prefer to use the one with the best sales, because oftentimes what I'll find, if there are two listings, one, let's say for example you have a book and there's two listings for it, one has a rank of 6 million, the other one has a rank of 200,000. Well, obviously the one with the 200,000 is the one you want to go with, because that's the one that's actually selling. That's a personal choice, but you do have the option to change that to whatever you would prefer. I don't like to have the pop-up because it does slow me down. Other people really like to take their time and be able to look and see what the options are when they're listing. You can suppress error messages as you're listing. Again, this is really meant for efficiency. Some people don't like to have those pop-ups. They just want to scan, scan, scan. And so you can enable that if you so choose. Now, the next item here is something I would definitely consider enabling. This is when you are listing an item, say you have a quantity of one, and then you're listing, say, a whole stack of items, and as you're working through the stack, you come across again and that same item a second time, and it's in the same condition. Let's say you're listing a stack of 100 books and they're all in good condition, and you scan a book, say the 10th book you scan is the same as the 20th book you scan. Well, when you hit that 20th book, ScanLister detects that it's basically the same as that 10th book, and instead of listing it under two different SKUs, it will just update your quantity that you're sending in two of the same SKU. Now, hopefully that wasn't confusing, but when you're listing products on Amazon, Amazon policy is that you can only list the same item in the same condition under one SKU. And that'll make sense to you. If you go to a listing page, if I have 4 books, 4 of a certain title in good condition, Amazon doesn't want me to appear 4 different times in the search results or in the seller results for that book. They want me to appear 1 time with a quantity of 4. So this is a setting that I would recommend for most people. The other setting I would recommend is replenishment. And what this will allow, this will actually download a list of your items into ScanLister. And if you are listing an item, ScanLister will be able to check and see if you already have an active listing for that item. And if you do, it will add that to the existing SKU. In other words, you're not duplicating, and this goes back to Amazon's policy again. You're not listing the same product under multiple SKUs. If you use replenishment, you have the option of adding it to the existing SKU. And also save upload history. This is another one I would recommend, especially when you get into errors and things like that. It can be nice to have that information. So I would go ahead and set these, but this is what those are. Now, of course, here you have your different visual options of how the type of theme that you want ScanLister to use. As you can see how it changes things depending on whatever you like to look at. Your default tax code, depending on the type of products that you list. This is the tax code that's used. I know in many cases when Amazon is collecting the tax, I don't think it matters anymore, but there's where you can customize that. Now, you can set in a minimum price and a maximum price to send to Amazon. This can help with, it can really help with pricing errors and things like that, but this is kind of a blanket minimum price. For example, nothing would ever go below $6, and nothing would ever go above, I don't know, $1,000. And I'm going to save these settings. Now the next thing is there's a couple settings here for the box contents manager. So down here in the box contents, when you're using that, it is helpful to include the image and title for box contents. That way, as you're boxing items, you do get that visual. Now, if you have a slow internet connection, or if you really want maximum speed, there may be reasons why you would disable this. But if you're able to have it enabled, it doesn't slow you down too much. It is definitely a good option. And now this setting here will help you if you're listing. Let's say you're doing box contents and you happen to have multiple locations, multiple warehouse locations that an item is going to. ScanLister will automatically choose that for you if you enable this. So for those who are really familiar with the box contents workflow, if you're wondering about that setting, it's right here. Of course, the next setting we're going to look at is the printer settings, where you can set up your different printers, or if you use the same printer, you'll have the option of course, as you've seen here. I don't have a printer on this computer right now that I'm using for an example here, but this is where all those settings is. The next tabs you have here is for your Amazon account. I'm not going to click this tab right now because I would have to blur it out, but the only thing in here is your settings, which you've already set up when you initially install ScanLister. Then we're going to go over to the Utilities tab. This is where you can actually back up your data, or you can restore your data if you need to. Once you go through all these settings, it is not a bad idea to do a backup and to get that done. You can use Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, or Dropbox, which is really handy. And then, of course, the workflow templates. Right now, I just have a test template in here, but once you have everything configured the way you want it for, let's just say that sometimes you do merchant fulfilled listing, sometimes you do FBA listing, sometimes you list media, sometimes you may list retail products, and you have certain settings that you like for those types of products. You can actually go ahead and set up all the settings and save those as a template. And when you do that, you can quickly go back to those settings. So you could potentially make a workflow template for, again, for retail product, for CDs, for books, or whatever makes sense. And that way you don't have to go in and change all these little settings. each time you switch over between those different types of products that you list. So that can be a handy feature. The next thing we'll look at is the inventory tickets section. And of course, a lot of this is new. This is where you're going to actually go ahead and put your shelf locations in and the code. The code, again, is something that ends up in the ticket. So it's an abbreviated version of your shelving location. Now, you may put a longer description in here, and that will appear, that will be stored in ScanLister and appear in your inventory map. So the idea is you're going to use a shorter numeric or alphanumeric code that will be a quick reference, and then also the longer description here. You can set a storage limit for each shelf, and again, this is for merchant fulfilling. This is if you're running shelving units in your location and you want to be able to manage that inventory, track that inventory that you're listing in ScanLister. All the settings related to that are here. Now, if you're not merchant fulfilling, I would go ahead and uncheck this. If you're just doing FBA, and I would leave these unchecked. If you're not using these features, just turn them off. They'll stay out of your way. If you are merchant fulfilling, obviously, and you're using the ticket system, you want to enable that. Now the pick list, you can enable that for any PC that you're going to be using to pull orders from. Okay, and your inventory map is how you manage the items that are stored as being in your active inventory. Now, if you have one workstation, if you're primarily just doing everything on one computer, then you want to go ahead and enable these. These will, once I'll show you what happens when these are enabled. Save settings. These will cause let's see here, what is going on? Oh, there we go. So we've got some extra buttons that have popped up here. And that's where you can access those features down here. So if I go ahead and turn them off, those will disappear. There you go. So we've essentially enabled access for those features here. Now, you also have your sequence link having to do with your tickets, the numeric sequence that's automatically added to the tickets. 3 is good for a lot of situations. If you are a very large seller, you can obviously increase that. You can auto print the ticket, which I would recommend. If you'd like to see a preview before it prints, you can do that as well. So anyway, hopefully that's helpful, just kind of walking through some of these menu items. Certainly if you have any particular questions, if there's anything I missed or did not cover, feel free to go ahead and respond to this thread, and we'll do the best we can to answer those, and hopefully it'll make sense.